Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Debris, Season 1, Episode 8. It is called Spaceman. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. This was a big episode. This is probably the most prominent episode in terms of paying off and moving forward the overall main plot of the show. We get to finally meet George, Finola's father. We get to dive into some of that stuff. The plot structure of this episode's a little strange, just a little bit. What I really mean by that is just that there's certainly elements that make this feel more like the first half of a two-parter, without it ever being named at or sort of given more of a prominent to be continued kind of feel. In particular, there's I want to say a meta-human, but a debris-affected human that we meet at the start of the episode, and the characters encounter, a little bit into it, but then she kind of disappears, and that's just kind of that for the episode. It was kind of strange to have that just sort of be wrapped up. And obviously we're going to see her again. There's no way this is the last of her, but it was a little bit strange from an episode. It felt like, if anything, you would do that at the end of the episode. Obviously it wouldn't fit there, given everything else that goes on, but it's just a little weird thing from a structural point of view as you're watching it. But I will say I loved the scenes with this character, though. So the opening of the episode is this woman running, sort of, she's in like a hospital kind of overall kind of thing, and she's running through the woods. It's like an old power plant or something like that in a warehouse, and she's like ducking and diving, and she's scared for her life or something. She's clearly agitated. And then eventually she runs into this guy who immediately sort of shuts the door, and it's like there's a security team that they're trying to block her in. She's not supposed to be up and moving around. This is clearly a victim, a prisoner of some sort of weird, wacky experiment by Influx, who has gotten free. And, it's dark. The images are really, morbid. She finds all these body bags of presumably other failed experiments. So all that stuff's there, but what really made this cool, so this was all solid, but what made it cool to me is when she's found, when she doesn't come out the back again, the two security guys come in and try to find her. And I liked how intelligent they kind of portrayed everyone here. I liked that the woman had the idea to hide in a body bag and pretend to be dead. That's a smart move. But I equally liked that the two guys weren't just dumb red shirts who couldn't possibly comprehend that she might have tried that. They've seen a movie or two. They know that might be something. She didn't come out the building. They know she's still inside. It was like one of the few places she could be hiding was in a body bag. So, he immediately kind of goes, after a little bit of suspense, goes for the body bag. So that was neat. But what's cool here was the sci-fi debris effect that happens, where she phases through him when he's trying to grab her, that's neat, that's cool, that's advancing things. We're using debris to alter human beings so they can have powers that they clearly don't control. And maybe she will gain control if we spend more time with her, and we'll see that she can be trained, and Influx presumably want to make super soldiers or whatever. But as she phases through him, again purely by accident, she sort of drags the body bag with her. But it's not like on her anymore. She's not like, surrounded by it. It's kind of just like on the bottom half of her body. So when she phases through the guy, the body bag is sort of left inside of him. And it's sort of like half in, half out. And you get the sense that these sheets of plastic of this body bag are actually just blocking his arteries, his everything. Like, it's just like it's solidified through his body at, the various parts where the bag is interacting. And he just kind of like goes purple and dies and can't breathe and can't do anything. And it seems very painful, and I imagine it must be very painful. This was horrific in a really cool death, in a way that it didn't have to make the character who does it feel villainous or anything. This was purely accidental. This is her just trying to fight to survive. She clearly didn't know she could do this. This was just a perfect intro that got me going, ooh. I was like, ooh, what's going on here? I'm into it. So that's super neat. And when the characters interact with it later, they realize she came from this location. She mentions a ball of light, which I didn't remember from the previous time it was brought up, but the episode did a good job of reminding me of which episode. It was the episode with all the clones of that one guy bringing up the ball of light, and we see this ball of light later in the episode. But they send some of the team back with her to take her to a safe place, and not that I necessarily trust what Maddox and co are going to like put her through or do with her or whatever. So neat stuff. But that was it. That was it for this character. Everything with her was super interesting and had some great visuals, but that was it. So I'm excited to see what they do more with her and maybe other characters like her if we get more of these sort of enhanced human beings, if that's even the way you'd want to phrase it. Of course, the rest of the episode was completely paying off everything we've been doing in the background with the Maddox and CIA lady, whose name I'll eventually one day have to remember. Ferris, there you go, that's her name. But also, of course, the core relationship between Brian and Finola, and there was some stuff that this did right away. And I think I know when I can trust the writing on a TV show when there's simple fundamentals that are adhered to, that enhance scenes that could be really drab otherwise. Simple little things like at the start of the episode, Finola comes in and there's going to be a briefing where it's now out in the open. Maddox even says the first thing he says in this meeting is like, "Oh, as we've come to confirm, we believe that he's alive. Your father's alive," and he looks right at her. And her body language and the overall atmosphere of this briefing, talking about them going to this potential site that they got from Ash, this influx base or experimental lab or whatever it is. The body language and the atmosphere of this scene is completely informed with the fact that she found out about this episodes ago and it was in secret and she wasn't sure if she could trust Brian, and then when they all get everything out in the open, she's convinced she can't trust Maddox. So Maddox trying to present all of this as him being forthcoming and her having to kind of just go along with it, but clearly is getting kind of emotional, clearly is uncomfortable. All of that kind of painted this dynamic. It gave us this dynamic where we can feel the tension in the room, and it's just a simple thing of like everything that we have had up until this point informing how this scene is played and how the characters are trying to play it, where he's trying to present it as he's on her side, that he is being forthcoming, that he is giving her all this information. Eventually she asks a question about the site, or if we know he's still alive, or is there anything more recent, blah blah blah. She asks some questions, and even Maddox's answer felt kind of disingenuous, where he says he's trying to be a friend to her, he's trying to pretend that he can be trusted, and he says, this is all we have, I do wish we had more. And it was that line, I wish we had more, it felt not slimy. I think slimy is maybe even too far, but he might have the best of reasons for doing the various things that he's doing. We're not really sure his motivations on every decision right now, but because we are coming from Finola's perspective and because she is one of our main two characters, we are inherently siding with her more by default, and the line sort of cuts through a little bit, and I think you can feel the way Finola is feeling in the scene when he says that. You feel this untrusting quality to him. You're skeptical of what he's saying, and you're basically thinking, I don't believe you. I don't believe that you care. Even though the sentence itself, I wish we had more, is probably actually true, because of course, why would he wish he has more intel? That doesn't have to even be remotely tied to how he actually feels emotionally about what he's doing or how genuine he is. He can want more intel separate from everything else. But that's not the way the sentence is presented. The sentence is presented as a hand reaching out, as a show of friendship, or even friendship, just like trust. So, and it's not even, and this scene's not even a highlight of the episode necessarily, but it's a scene that is enhanced greatly because it's done a good job of building everything leading to this point. So even the idea that we've had Brian in this office, in the CIA office, a couple of times throughout the show, right back at the start, and then definitely a couple of episodes ago, he came out to speak to Maddox. And I think even Finola's presence here, she's here in this domain, feels like a prominent little detail. It feels kind of special to have her be here. It feels a little bit like we're crossing lines we've not seen crossed before. As simple and as small as that is, it just felt kind of, it made it feel a bit more special and notable right from the get-go that we're okay, this episode's going places we haven't been yet because we're having her interacting with this character. We've seen him speak to her before, back in episode 5, I think that was, but this is the first time it's been actually in his office. So again, we're going a little bit further with all this stuff. And then what the episode does is that it has both Finola and Brian contacted by their superiors, and in Brian's case, I say contacted, he's having a conversation in Maddox's office, where Maddox drops this bombshell where he doesn't want George brought in alive. He wants him killed on sight. Finola can't be the first in the door because you have to lie to her, you have to give her a story as to why he had to be shot down, and he won't tell Brian why though. Because Brian tries to, argue and say, look, why even do this? Like, he can still be an asset. He can tell us so much about what they're doing. But for some reason, and this is probably a good thing to speculate, although I don't really have any great insights here, as to why he wants George dead. Mainly because perhaps George might have something that will lead back to him. That said, though, other agents know about this order, so presumably it is CIA approved in some way. So what exactly are the CIA afraid of? If it isn't Maddox personally who's afraid of the information, is the debris that George talks about later in the episode, is that the same piece of debris, or at least related to the debris that Maddox is trying to procure through back channels, and is that why he doesn't want any of this, going further? But he tells Brian this. He says, this is just what we're doing. He doesn't say why. He just says, this is what's happening. This is the order. And Brian is clearly conflicted by this. At the same time, Finola's being told by Ferris that there's going to be a convoy. They're going to intercept and basically, take her and her father away from the CIA, get them on a plane straight back to London so that they're not with the CIA. And the attempt to the previous episode kind of becomes clear, but when Ferris brings up her sister, it's like, okay, this was all about manipulating her into like coming home, and I'm obviously adding a little bit from later in the episode into that as well. But so yeah, you have, I talked about how last episode both characters were being pulled, the strings were being pulled by their higher ups on both sides, and the one thing that was going to see them through this, the one thing that was going to like let them overcome these strings, was the fact that they are openly communicating with each other, the fact that they are forming a bond, a friendship, a trust that is more genuine, is not is not based in lies, and it's not based on spying and all these things. It's based on actual trust. And I cannot tell you how much I wanted to cheer for the writing of the show when the two characters got in the car right after these two separate scenes that were kind of like intercutting between each other, and Finola immediately says, oh, they're going to try and like take us away on a plane, and they're sending in the agent, what was his name, Brill. They're saying, we'll talk about Brill later. I've got thoughts on Brill, but they're sending in Brill and they're going to take us away. And the fact that then Brian immediately responds with, well, that won't matter if he's dead, and then has to explain to her that the order is to kill him. And she obviously gets very emotional, the reaction feels genuine, but the fact that these two characters were not going back, there's no backpedaling here, there's no, for the sake of drama, we're going to have him, because part of me was worried that, Maddox is going to make this very clear that this is super important, and Brian's going to be tested once again, where he maybe does hold back a little bit, because it's just, it's too much to tell her this, like, this is so heavy that I'm supposed to kill her father. I can't tell her this. Like, I was worried that they were going to go down that path, and it was so refreshing for it to be, no, we're at a place now where they tell each other things, and he is going to tell her. And while he can't necessarily completely just go against Maddox shit and say, oh no, I don't trust him at all, he's evil, whatever, he's not ready to say that, but he does say fundamentally, your father is not safe if he's here, so I'm going to help you get him out. That is great. And then her response I also loved. I loved that her first thing, after he makes that point clear that he is on team let's save your dad, her first thought is, yeah, but what about you? You're essentially betraying a direct order at that point. What does that mean for you if if we go through with that. And this was just a perfect example of this being a two-way street. This was not just about her, and don't get me wrong, her father's life is at stake. She has way more investment in that than Brian necessarily does directly, although his bond and past with Maddox is certainly important to him. You could play this as this is just a one-way street where that's clearly more important, and that could be it. She could thank him perhaps, but that doesn't necessarily have to go any further than that. The fact that it does go one step further, and she actually immediately says, no, I'm concerned about what this means for you. This might mean that you get into serious trouble. I mean, disobeying an order from the CIA, you have to imagine the repercussions from that could be very serious. He could be treated as an enemy, if not just treason, if not whatever. Like, you know, like that. This could be super serious. And I love that her first concern is for him too. You know, after they've established, okay, you're going to help save my father, but what does that mean for you? And it further establishes this bond between them. It further establishes this, they do actually give a shit about each other. And, you know, I've been saying since the start of the show that Brian's whole thing is that he is obviously very cut off emotionally. He struggles to deal with these feelings and be open about them. And the idea that she does immediately, so for him to say, I'm going to help save your father, is kind of a mini fist pump moment, because, you know, he's going to stand by his ethics, he's going to stand by what he believes in. Not that he ever seemed like a character who wouldn't stand by his ethics by any means, but it feels like a mini fist pump moment. But then I think her responding with, no, this is also about you, I'm concerned about you, is another fist pump moment, because it's like, yes, I've been saying since the start of the show that they're kind of important for each other, but that her effect on him will be to let him open up more and for him to reach kind of this equilibrium with himself and all these things. So the character work for these two, I think, is built upon itself as the show has went on. And I think any complaints at the start of the show about the characters, you know, I remember Connor not being into them in that first episode, and I thought there was enough of a seed planted that I could kind of see what they maybe wanted to do. And this is where serialized storytelling becomes really great, is where it's only 8 episodes later, we're only on episode 8, but already they've built enough with both characters that I found myself in these scenes being satisfied, because one, the drama of them both being played against each other still hits, because it's putting into jeopardy the bond that has been formed, but then them to immediately make it clear, no, we are past this bullshit, we are working together, we care about each other, is very rewarding. And it feels like it all feels natural with who the characters have been, and that's great. So we haven't got to the mystery stuff of the episode yet, really, and I've already praised things for a while. We're almost at 20 minutes. This is so yeah, they go to the site, they do a bit of, quiet investigating. There's other victims, there's other people being experimented on that they free. They're quietly going through the building. Eventually, of course, there is confrontations with gunmen. We do see the ball of light, whatever it may be, with a scientist who kind of freaks out when he sees them. But ultimately, of course, we find George, we find the father, and he just has this little cot in a lab, basically. And all my theories about him being the mastermind villain, which I'm not going to throw out completely, they could always still swerve us, but I think the comparisons to Fringe, which obviously were always valid because the various things about the show that are comparable in terms of premise and feel, but also because we have a creator from Fringe. And I think the comparisons might never be more than the introduction of George properly, where we actually get to meet him, because it was hard not to get total Walter Bishop vibes from this character. His, slight confusion, his sort of over focus on work but sympathy and regret over not being there with his daughters, but ultimately having a very noble no pun intended, because the actor who played Walter was John Noble, but a very noble goal ultimately, and what he's and what his intent was for all of his research in the first place. Obviously it's been manipulated and it's been bastardized by Influx. So I thought the moment, I thought the music that played, the vocals came in a little bit when they hugged. It was really good. Obviously there was an agent there on Finola's side, who gets shot when they're trying to get out. There's a bit of a standoff, but the CIA guy who also knows about this order tries to, he shoots the other soldier who's there, but then he gets put down, and we get this escape. The soldier who was sort of on their side dies, unfortunately, but Brian goes back and wipes the hard drives, or steals the hard drive, so there's no security footage because no one else knows that he was there. Their story is going to be is that George just wasn't there, and that that's cool and that's fine. That gets them in the car. I think this is probably a good time to talk about Brill, because Brill's he's waiting to intercept this this car. He's waiting to take Finola and George back to London, or is he? Or is he? So we've seen this character once before, and he seemed normal enough when Finola met him, that one brief scene. So he's waiting here, he's on the phone, and he's got kind of like a marking down the side of his face. You wouldn't see it on me if I had it because I've got a beard, but he's got this marking down the side of his face, and he talks to the other guy that's there in the little trailer or whatever it is, and he says, "Oh, you need to fix your face," or something to that effect. I forget the exact line of dialogue, but he goes to this other room, and this is like so. It's amazing to me what you can get away with on network TV now, because this is some straight up Texas Chainsaw Massacre shit. He's got presumably the real Brill on like a medical table. Whoever this is an imposter, and seemingly to keep the appearance of being Brill up, he's got Brill hooked up to something where I assume he keeps regrowing his skin and his face, because he cuts off his face and just slaps it on like a mask, and it is like proper disturbing. And I'm like, how does it like fuse in? Like, is that like also debris tech, or like what are you doing with this? But it was a really creepy image that opens so many questions. So who is this? Is this someone working with Influx who's going to intercept things? Who is this who has infiltrated this not the CIA, the MI6? Who has infiltrated the British side of this intelligence? And I immediately went, wait, is this why Ferris is acting weird too? Is she also being like swapped out? Is this not really her anymore? Now, I'm not convinced of that, because later in the episode, the phone call later in the episode, she seems to open up a little bit to Finola, and it felt like it was still really her. She's just been kind of shady, as opposed to being body swapped with like this guy has been clearly. But it's a possibility, so I'll throw it out there. But it does open these questions, like who is he actually working on behalf of? Who's infiltrated MI6? Very intrigued. Is this just part of Influx? Is this someone else? Is this a group that we've not met yet? I was going to say maybe is it like CIA, but then that wouldn't make sense, because then Maddox would know they were going to intercept, and therefore there'd be other ways to deal with it, so that wouldn't necessarily make that much sense. They never get there though. Luckily, because of a phone call from her sister, Finola kind of pieces a lot of things together. Finola hears from her sister, who calls on a friend's phone, so it can't be listened to, about being forced to make that call before. A little detail here that I really liked is like you can just see him out of focus in the background, but George's reaction when he hears her name, the sister's name, Dee. Like there's a moment where he clearly, because he's very confused, he doesn't remember everything. He's very I don't know what's the word I'm looking for here. But anyway, he's very confused and sort of old man and all that. But he clearly recognizes that name, and it's like a moment for him when he hears, "Oh yeah, my other daughter." It's the sort of thing when he's scared when Finola first walks around with a gun, but then he recognizes her, and it's this kind of sweet moment. Apologies, pardon me. So she figures this out, and it's like, no, we can't trust either of them. We're kind of on our own. We're not going anywhere. I don't trust Ferris either. Let's go somewhere else. So they go to a motel, and we get the last like 10 or so minutes of the episode. There's a lot of stuff that comes up. We find out that Influx from George want to find this very specific piece of debris. He doesn't remember what it does, but it's game changing. It's something that it won't matter, or we'll probably all die, or something. He's very ominous with it. when he's talking about the effects of whatever this is going to be, but he doesn't remember exactly what it does. But they were forcing him to build a device to track it. Exactly how they know it exists and it can be tracked. George does speculate that everyone involved probably wants it. You know, the Chinese, the Russians, the Americans. Maybe that's the piece of tech that Maddox is trying to actually get. Maybe one of these organizations already has it, and that's why everyone knows about it, and that's why they're tracking it. But Influx are organized, they're looking for it. And that becomes kind of a goal here. It becomes kind of the goal, well, we have to find this first. We have to stop whatever this is because it might, like, you know, ruin the world. And we have to save it. So it gives us a clear goal. It gives us a clear goal, at least for an episode or two, where, okay, we have to get to this MacGuffin. So they're going to try and build their own version of the tracker, because it was finished enough that Influx can probably finish it on their own and use it. So, clear goal, which is nice. And then some of the other stuff that came up here was really nice. You know, Finola and Brian, like, sort of forming plans together. Finola having her emotional scene with her father about kind of him being distant and shutting her out, and him making this grand speech and apologizing and wishing he was there more for her and her sister. But he gives a really good speech here about, you know how important his work with the debris was, about how it was about, you know, regrowing forests in days instead of months, or not months, sorry, decades. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, days would be pretty good, or months would be pretty good still. But it's about revitalizing the planet, it's about saving the world, it's about doing all these things. It's about, you know, that this technology is a gift and we can use it to, like, save the world. And, you know, the idea that there's these evil groups potentially try to do very sinister things with it, the idea that the good guys might try to use it for, you know, much more clearly just, you know, blanket wins across the board. You know, curing things like famine, regrowing forests, all seem like pretty noble aspirations. It's a pretty good speech. I think I liked the performance from the actor here playing George. I liked that it didn't sound too, like, Hollywood. It felt just, there was enough times where he repeated a line here or there where it felt oddly kind of natural. Like, it's the sort of thing you could almost critique and say it sounded like, you know, he forgot a line so he repeated one here, or he stammered a little bit too much or something. But I actually really liked it because it felt like it fit his character, so I think it's completely intentional, but it felt so natural. The way, you know, he'd repeat a phrase here or there, because he says this is about, and then he lists the things, and then when he gets, he sort of punctuates his point again by saying that's what this is about. And it wasn't great English. I mean, I do it sometimes, of course, when I'm talking, because I'm talking without a script and I'm just giving my thoughts. I'm letting them flow as much as I can. But here, you know, in movies and TV, typically you have things be more refined, you have them be succinct. But for a character like this who is a little confused, who can't really quite remember things, he needs, you know, information from files that the MI6 have. So that's, you know, why Finola's going to call Ferris and get them, blah, blah, blah. But this moment here, I thought was really well done, and how stilted he comes across, how confused. It is very Walter Bishop, where you feel this sympathy for him and you want him to, like, pull off what he was trying to do and help save everything. Because there's a moment as well, because he shares a little moment with Brian, and I think that's also really important, is that Brian spends just a moment with him alone, just to have his own bit of sympathy with him, where he wants to just go. He's like, oh, hey, you know, I've got a list of things to build this thing, and, you know, it's in my head and I forget things, so maybe we should go just now. And Brian has to reassure him, and there's a moment where he says, I'm not safe here, we should go. And Brian's like, no, I'm going to be outside, like, you're like, nothing's going to happen to you. And he has to reassure him, and that moment, and then Brian just got out and sit in the car and just essentially sitting guard for the night to make sure he's okay. Again, it's kind of sweet, and it's this, you know, planning and, like, working together that kind of gives us this family feel for the heroes. I mean, literally, and obviously in Finola and George's case, but you know, I mean, even the makeup of having the older character who doesn't remember things but is a genius, and, you know, having this man and woman main characters is very fringe in terms of his makeup. So, you know, I mean, you can critique that if you want to. I don't think it really matters in that sense. It doesn't really matter the makeup of the trio, if you will, if that's what we're going to stick with now. I don't know if George is going to be sticking around as a main character constantly. I could see him only being here for a few episodes and then either being captured or possibly even killed, which would be really sad. But I think it's well handled in this episode for sure. I love that when he's making his emotional speech to Finola, there's kind of a sweet piano version of the main theme that kind of comes into the soundtrack. I thought I have a 5.1 system, and I really liked how sharp the piano notes were hitting, particularly behind my head. Like the surround mix was really good with this, where when those piano beats started coming in, it really felt like it was like touching me. It's like touching my soul or something. That's a weird thing to say, but sometimes audio has that effect where you can really sort of like feel like it cuts through you a little bit. And I've been a fan of the music on this show, and I think this episode's another good example of it. I really dug that. And I didn't even mention, like, when he brings up like how he's alive. He did legitimately die. He says that they've got debris that can bring people back. Only once though, so it's not like a be all catch all. Everyone can just keep coming back. But and his eye's all messed up because they had to like put debris in his eye or something like that. So very very curious to see how that sort of side of things progresses, and I imagine it might give us like a get out of free jail card once with a character. And when I said there that I could see George dying, they've introduced this thing that can bring people back, but notably not him. He is the vulnerable one now in terms of writing, even though there's a chance that anyone else could die, and if they die, if their head gets cut off, I assume they're still just dead. Like I don't think you can bring someone back from that. But the idea is they've introduced a thing that can save someone's life when normally you wouldn't. But the one who already feels the most vulnerable, because he's not one of the main two, because he is this third character who they've spent time finding, and because it would have such an effect on the other two, particularly Finola, if he dies, but they've made it very clear from a plot mechanics perspective that he cannot be brought back now. He is vulnerable. He is the one that if he dies, he dies. And that makes me a little worried. It makes me feel sympathy. It makes me feel on edge for him. And it was already going to be about protecting him. There was no part of me that was worried that either of our main two characters were going to die in season 1. But he could die. He could go. And the plot's making it very clear. He is at risk. He is the one who could go. So it just adds that extra layer there. And then the sad ending where he gets like tinfoil. Or what was it? What did he call it? Aluminium foil. Or aluminum foil for the American pronunciation. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. And he puts tinfoil all over the bed and sleeps under the tinfoil. And it really gives you this, and again, it's very Walter Bishop, but it gives you this sense of like his paranoia, where his mind is. It just feels very sad. But I think in one episode it gave us this character whose intentions were extremely noble, and it's hard not to root for him a little bit now. And having him be this character that is also acting somewhat as a plot device for our main two. He is the character that they are bonding to save, and in Finola, I should mention, she does call Ferris. I did laugh a little bit because instead of like telling us that we're in London now, Ferris's phone just had the Union Jack background, and I thought, yeah, all right, yeah, all right. It's the sort of thing I roll my. I'm not a person who cares about having a flag up or having the flag as a background. So it makes me roll my eyes anyway. I think it's particularly funny here though, because it's almost a shortcut to tell us, hey, we're in the. I mean, we know that anyway because we know that's where Ferris is typically. Unless she's not, unless she's on a plane and she's been on a plane. I mean, it's possible they could twist us with, oh, she's been in the US for the last 24 hours or something. I don't think so, but anyway. So Finola says, look, you were trying to emotionally manipulate me to come home, and the second I arrived with my father, you were going to take me off the case and never let me come back. Arguably, and I'm adding to this, but presumably the reason why they even had her on this case in the first place is that she would be driven to find him, is that she would go further and above and beyond any other agent because she has an emotional investment in finding him. Actually, that's not true because I didn't know he was alive at first. Yeah, disregard that. But, at the very least, I imagine that was like a silver lining to how things changed over time. And Ferris admits this, that is pretty true. So But Finola outright says, you're not getting him. You're not getting George Jones. But she does ask for the files, and Ferris says she'll see what she can do, and that's kind of, from a plot perspective, that's the episode. So super interesting stuff here. I think there's a lot of good things with the main pair of characters. I think it also does a great job of introducing us to, I mean, not a new character in terms of concept, because we've been hearing about George for, since episode 1. But in terms of actually getting to meet him and getting a first impression and making us care about him, I think this episode does a really good job of doing that. And I'm on board with them. I want them to go along with them. It'll break my heart if it turns out he's actually manipulating them in some way, and this is all for nothing, or maybe this is how he can finally complete his device. Maybe that's why resistance was so light at the influx base. It wasn't that many people to fight them off. Maybe that was intentional. I don't know, but I'm on board. I want them to go, and they established that he went to visit someone, the other scientist, and he doesn't remember this. And that's maybe the one thing that makes me, I mean, obviously it sets up that maybe this is what his mind is like right now, but maybe that's the one thing that hints that, maybe there is something suspicious going on here. Maybe there's a reason why he went to see him with Influx in the first place. Why would they take him there? Well, it's not like they let him go visit someone out of the kindness of their heart, right? If he is truly just kidnapped, it makes me think there's a reason for it, and it may still be for their perspective, they might still have wanted to go see him because he needed information from him in the first place just to build a device, which is probably what it is. But I'm just throwing out the little things out there that might lead to something. So super fascinating, in a lot of ways. I'm very intrigued though, or I'm very confident with the characters now. I'm very confident they know what they're doing with the two leads and even George, because everything in this episode plays off so well of what we've built to, and it feels like we've taken a big step forward, because they're clearly, I mean, Maddox is being lied to about George not being there, but Finola sort of laying it straight with her boss is kind of a nice step forward, where we've already changed the status quo. We're not going a whole season of 22 episodes where we're doing Freak of the Week stuff, and even though the standalone episodes so far have been mostly really good, we're already advancing what the status quo is. We're already advancing how the show plays out episode to episode, and that's refreshing. I feel like we got just enough of that case of the week style stuff where we build up a portfolio of what these events are, the type of stuff we're doing, and we can come back to them from time to time for special occasions, or for not even special. That sounds like it should be rare. We could even have blocks of them again, but for now we've definitely switched to something, and they've got a clear goal in mind for next episode, so that's pretty cool. So I'll stop rambling on here, but I thought this was a really good episode, and I'm looking forward to the next one. It was pointed out to me on Twitter that the audio snippets in the closing credits actually do tell a story. I kind of assumed they were just the same each episode, but apparently if you go back and listen to them back to back, they actually form a story, presumably of when the debris was landing initially, because that's what it sounds like. It sounds like, pilots and air traffic and whatever, but apparently it does build a story. I haven't went back and listened to them yet to actually see that for myself, but I should probably look into that soon to just to hear what the story has been told in that part of the episode. But really good. I really like this episode. I think it being a little odd from a structure perspective, and feeling like it doesn't, because when I said it feels like a two-parter in a lot of ways, not only just because the woman with the powers kind of disappears quite early, but also because the ending feels less like an ending and more like halfway through a story, because we've set up a clear goal for next episode. And maybe that's just because the moment that it ends on is that downbeat moment with her father and the tinfoil. But no, looking forward. He doesn't want to be tracked. If nothing else, it's shown how scared he is of being found and being taken again by him being under the tinfoil. So I'm excited for more. So That is Debris episode 8. Let me know what you think of this one in the comments below. Please do like and subscribe. It is the simple and free way to support everything we do on MailFuzz TV and keep all the content coming. But you can, of course, support us even more directly by going to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting us for as little as $1 per month. And again, helping all the content continue. So thank you very much for joining me. I do always appreciate it. I am really digging the show. And I know it was a little bit later in the week this week. Apologies for that. I will try at my very best to have it no later on Wednesdays. Although I prefer Tuesdays. It's a little bit tougher now because there's now also what else was I doing on Tuesday? I don't know. There was something else on Tuesday that stopped me from getting to it on the usual day. But regardless, I'll do my best to try and keep it a bit quicker. But that is Debris, episode 8. So thank you once again. I will see you next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got Eddie Vanilla?